I used to drink at a certain pub in Glasgow and go to a nightclub after. The pub was populated by bikers and other heavy music fans, and this one guy that wore pale blue jeans, a white iron shirt, totally didn't fit in. Now, I'm an antisocial girl, so I would sit in the pub with a book. I like a pint, music, and having people around. I just didn't like talking, but the white shirt man kept trying. He would nod at me whenever I looked up, try and buy me a drink when I went to the bar, and several times he sat at my table trying to start a conversation. Apparently saying, "Sorry, not interested," didn't mean anything to him. One night, I was really dressed up because I felt like it. Creepy white shirt guy kept trying to catch my eye. When I walk around to the nightclub, he followed me persistently, trying to get my attention. Walking in the nightclub, I gave a bouncer my usual nod greeting. They all knew me. I went to pay to get in, and a white shirt arm popped past me, and he said, "R2, we're together." I said, No, actually, one for me please, Kate," and went in. All night, this guy followed me. The club was 3 floors and was packed, but this guy would even wait outside of the loos if I went in. One friend I left my drink with later admitted that he put it down on the bar for a while. After a while, I started feeling odd, very odd. I was dizzy, sweating and shaking. I decided I must be coming down with something and decided to head home. I don't remember going down the stairs, but apparently white shirt followed me. However, the bouncer stopped the creep getting me out when he tried saying that I had too much to drink. I used to run pubs, and the bouncer knew I knew my limits and said I wasn't drunk, that I was ill. White shirt guy apparently got pushy, and Dal, the bouncer, ended up pinning him against a wall, and during this time, I managed to wander off. One street behind the club is the red light district. No idea how I got there, but I was spotted 3 hours later walking up to the main road by my home. My skirt was ripped, I had no shoes, coat, or bag. A biker friend who was also a cab driver recognized my tattoos from the back and stopped to see if I was okay. He instantly realized I wasn't, got me in his car and phoned the nearby hospital to say that he was bringing me in. 3 days later, I finally make enough sense to find out what happened. My drink was spiked with ketamine, a borderline dangerous dose too. The cab driver talked to Dal the bouncer, and between them, they figured out what had happened. The cab driver and his friends tracked down this white shirt creep and gave him a kicking. Then the railway lads heard and they also gave him a kicking. He was barred from the club and bar club, but it was an awful long time before I went out again. So this is being shared because my creeper father has made a comeback. Well, at least he has attempted to anyway. Due to his attempt, I was reminded of some of his creepy moments and decided to share some of them. Before I do though, here's some quick notes. My parents divorced when I was 7. I'm the oldest of 4 children. I'm currently 28 years old, and none of us have spoken to him in about 6 to 7 years. He recently attempted contact, but none of us were willing to deal with him. I did post a year or 2 back about how his family tended to watch my siblings and I sleep when we visited. They did that for years, and to this day, we don't understand why. I also made a post about how his mother attempted to kidnap me from school after the divorce. I intended to post more creepy family antics, but I became busy with life. So, now that we're all caught up, let's get to the meat of all of this. So my father is, at the worst of times, a mentally unstable abuser, and, at the best, a deadbeat dad. After the divorce, we saw him less, and because of this, and court papers, his abuse became less physical and more creepy. He would do things like walk in on my siblings and I in the shower or changing by picking the lock, and upon entering, say he had to ask us something. Usually, it was something like what we wanted for dinner or if we wanted to go see our grandparents. Things that easily could have been asked through a door or even waited till we were done. I have 2 young sisters and 1 younger brother. We all grew up very close and at our youngest ages tended to change or shower together so no one was left alone with Dad. As we grew up, we learned how to keep him out of the room and bathroom. So he began to do other things. He would rub my younger brother's inner thigh when he was 4 and talk about how much he looked like our mother. He would slap my younger sister on the butt as she went up to accept an award at school when she was 8 or 9. This stuff became pretty normal, despite our visits being sporadic. He would focus on making life hard for my mum, and he would file with the court saying that she was keeping us from seeing him, when in actuality, he was never picking us up. When I was 15, we got a call from my father's stepdad informing us that our father was missing. This was news for us at the time because we hadn't heard from him for about 3 years. However, my grandpa claimed that Dad talked about seeing us all the time. 2 weeks go by since Grandpa called, and still no sign of Dad. One day though, Mum picks us all up early from school with news that Dad had been found. We weren't sure how to feel, of course, but that soon changed when Mum began to drive to an aunt's house 4 hours away. We realised something was going on and asked what it was. Mum said it wasn't the cops who found Dad, that it was Grandpa. He had been found half a mile away from where we were living. His car was loaded with hunting equipment and a picture of me and another of my mother. Both of our faces were scratched out and he had been muttering about how to kill us. Now apparently, Grandpa moved Dad in his car, took his hunting equipment and then phoned Mum about it. Then Grandpa phoned the cops anonymously to go pick up the crazy man outside a Kmart. The cops magically found Dad outside of a Kmart under severe mental duress, shouting about how someone had taken his hunting bow set and shotgun. Dad didn't have any of that registered, so they didn't know if he had it or if it was just in his head. But they take him in anyway. They have no clue about Grandpa's involvement. Months later, he is released with a bunch of pills to keep him in check. And he never takes them. He is granted continued visitation with us as well. He spends the next few years seeing us even more sporadically, but still filing reports that my mother never lets him see us. He shows up at my brother's middle school when he is 14, attempts to pull him out of class to take him to go see a prostitute. And when my brother refuses to go, Daddy Dearest decides to cause a scene and tries to fistfight my little brother. Campus police get involved, and when my dad is questioned, he informs them that my brother doesn't respect him because of me. Well, my father is escorted off campus and banned from ever coming back. We hear nothing from him again for another couple of years. And then he shows up again, demanding visitation with my siblings, which the court still lets him have. And because I'm over 18, I didn't have to see him. I was already at a friend's house, so my mum told him she'd call me. And he said don't bother. He took the other 3 to see our grandparents. And, in the midst of berating my 3 siblings and talking smack about my mother and I, my little sister stands up to him. Support is given by the other 2 with her, and Dad returns them to my mother saying that I've poisoned them against him. I reach 22 and we're called and told that his mother is dying. We say goodbye, pay our respects at the funeral, and return to our schooling, lives and jobs. I get married and I don't even get a card from him. Both sisters graduate college and he never shows up to the ceremonies. My little brother graduates from high school and not even a phone call. But just last week, he sends 3 out of the 4 of us a Facebook message. None of us have him blocked, but we don't have him added either. My brother received a message saying how, you know Daddy loves you and his life has been really hard. I've tried to always be there for you and do what is best. It was your mother that's always stopped me. She and your older sister hate me. Please talk to me so I can tell you how my life has been. A sister received something similar in phrasing. Neither message asked about their lives. In my message he says that he has stayed away because of me and my request. That even though I have deprived him of interaction with my siblings, he still loves me and wants to tell me about his life. He goes on to remind me that the family was broken up because of me. My marriage is briefly mentioned as, oh yeah, you got married, my life is terrible, you need to message me so I can tell you about it, kind of way. When we informed our mother, she told me she got a call from out of state where my dad lived, but didn't answer because she wasn't home. She hadn't called him back because, in honesty, she didn't know that the number was his and didn't think about it being from him till we told her. She listened to the message that he left, and it turns out that he just breathed into the phone for a bit before saying her name, my name, and my sibling's name. Then there was more breathing until the machine cut him short. At this point, all of us agreed that we didn't want to deal with his creepy anymore. I've been kind of putting this off since it happened, but I can't stop thinking about it. On Friday, I go to my cousin's apartment complex to babysit my baby cousin, and it's early morning, like 9 AM. I'm just sitting on their carpet floor eating breakfast I picked up along the way. Baby and his big sister are still sleeping, so I'm alone in the living room. I'm peacefully watching TV when one of the cabinets right in front of me just slowly opens. I've had little experiences happen to me in my own house where I've been scratched, TV turns off by itself, and the bed covers pull straight off of me. But I've always chalked those up to something else because I've never actually seen them. And I have never had something literally open up by itself in front of my own damn eyes, let alone even in that apartment. So in my mind, I'm just like, what the fuck, it's too early for this. And I try not to react to it physically or show any response. I finished my food, so I decided to look into the cabinet to see if there was anything that maybe forced it open. And as soon as I get up, the baby monitor starts wildly beeping that the battery was low. So I put it on its charger since baby was still sleeping. I go back to the cabinet and there's nothing but books and some junk. I tried to see if it was just loose, so I closed it. And I myself couldn't even open it up again because there was a child lock on it, and it's really difficult to even get it open in general. Without full force, you can't open that cabinet. Mildly creeped out, I just go back to throwing away my garbage and watching TV, when suddenly the baby monitor starts going batshit crazy. Now's when I'm in full-fledged fear mode. I've used that baby monitor like 100 times, and never has it done that. Though I do know baby monitors can tune into different frequencies, it would have been very coincidental that it happened after the cabinet incident. Either way, I'm totally freaked out and text my friends and they tell me to call my mum, which I do. The baby monitor finally stops, and suddenly I'm filled with so much fear that I just start sobbing, and I don't even know why. I don't really cry about this stuff, and I usually try not to give it attention or feed into it. But I was bawling like someone I loved just died. After about 10 minutes, I finally calm down and go check on him and his sister, and they're both fine and sleeping peacefully. After that, nothing else happened and everything was fine. I just tried to ignore what happened and move on though. But ever since that day, I've always been scared when I babysit. I haven't told my cousin about it, or her daughter. I just strongly hope that it doesn't happen again. It was 2012 and I had just started college. I moved into my dorm a couple of weeks before class started as I had band camp, so I was pretty comfortable in the room by the time the class began. My roommate moved in a couple of days before classes. She was nice, but we didn't talk much. She spent a lot of evenings out with friends and sometimes didn't come back until late at night. I wasn't quite the night owl. Ben had me exhausted physically, and a barrage of classes had me exhausted mentally, so I usually didn't stay out past 10. A few weeks into the semester, something strange happened though. I had just gone to bed, and my roommate was still out somewhere. Now, I think I may have a very slight touch of insomnia, undiagnosed of course, because it takes me forever to fall asleep and I tend to wake up a few times each night. On a really good night, it takes me only half an hour to fall to sleep, but typically, it's anywhere from 1 to 2 hours. Oh, and I've tried everything to fall asleep faster, and nothing seems to help very much. On that night, I was lying there playing through this little story that's been helping me ever since I was a kid, when I hear a key in the door. I don't move and it barely disturbs me. I see red through my eyelids as my roommate opens the door, then back to black as she shuts it behind her. I hear the lock click. She walks into the bathroom, the sound of her gait now familiar to me. A minute or two later, she comes back out and stops. The bed was right in front of the bathroom door and hers was on the other side of the room. She should have walked right past my bed, but she just stood there. It was weird, but not alarming. Maybe she got a text and stopped to check it, or maybe her sleeve got caught on something. Maybe she had a rock in her shoes and wanted the door frame to steady herself. I kept playing through my story, pretending to sleep. She stood there for another 30 seconds or so, then started to move. This time though, it was different. I heard a foot slide slowly on the floor, then another, and then another. The sound was coming toward my bed, slowly but surely. When she got to the foot of my bed, she stopped. She stood there for a few seconds, then sat on the foot of my bed. I felt my feet shift under the blanket. I let them fall toward her, my ankles resting against her back. This was definitely weird. I felt my heart begin to race. I forced myself to keep taking slow, even breaths. After a moment, I felt her move. Inch by inch, I felt her body move up mine until her face was inches from mine. I could feel her breath against my face. Warmth radiated from her body. Something was really wrong. Well, besides a woman I barely knew putting herself so close to me in the middle of the night. But I couldn't put my finger on it. And then suddenly, it hit me. She was still sitting at the foot of my bed. My ankles were still pressed into her back, which was now leaning slightly toward my head. Yet somehow, she was pressed up so close to my face, close enough to feel her breath on my cheek. Well, whatever this was, I was convinced that it wasn't my roommate. I was terrified that she, or rather it, would hear my heart pounding. It was becoming nearly impossible to keep my breathing even. I struggled to keep my face from scrunching up in terror. It sat there staring at me for what felt like hours, and somehow I knew it wanted me to look. It had to know I was awake. I could feel its arms around me, barely close enough to touch me, hands pressed into the bed for support. It didn't sound like a woman breathing. It sounded different, slow and labored and hot on my face. I wanted to look to see what sort of thing could mimic the gait of a 5'5" woman, then stretch itself out to sit at my feet and breathe on my cheek. But I fought to keep my eyes closed. I don't know what it was, but something was telling me not to lay eyes on it. Finally, after some time, it slowly lifted itself up. The arms came off of the bed. Its back came to a neutral, upright position. It slowly stood and my feet rocked back to where they had been, and I heard it shuffle away. It shuffled all the way to the door and clicked open the lock. My vision was red through my eyelids, but I could see that it shuffled out of the door, closed it, then locked it back. I just laid there shaking for half an hour at least, too terrified to move or open my eyes. Finally, I calmed down and convinced myself that it had really gone and opened my eyes. And I was alone. I don't know how I got to sleep that night. I was probably too exhausted not to sleep after all of that. When I woke up the next morning, my roommate still hadn't returned. I asked her later in the day if she had come back to the dorm, and she said that she hadn't. Nothing like this has ever happened to me before, and I have no idea what to make of it. I can guarantee you that I was not asleep. I don't think I was experiencing sleep paralysis either. I made no attempt to move, but I also never got the feeling that I couldn't move. The only other paranormal experiences I've had were minor. They were hearing the sound of a party through my bedroom door at night, seeing a dark figure appear suddenly at the foot of my bed, hearing footsteps outside in the middle of the day when nobody was around. Relatively minor things, I guess. But this was so real, so shocking. It didn't feel the same. It felt sinister. The first thing that came to mind later on was something similar to the Slender Man, which I know is fake, but that's just the first thing that came to mind. This was years after I had watched Marble Hornets on YouTube, months before the Slender game even came out, or at least months before I heard about it anyway, so I don't think I was taking the myth and personifying it in my tired mind. I don't see any way that this could have been my roommate playing some trick on me either. She would have had to have had some help, someone to sit at my feet and someone else to lean over my face, and if someone else was moving around the room, I would have been able to hear it. The floors were loud and the walls were brick, and there was no fan or anything else making noise, just a quiet mini fridge and the air conditioner, which doesn't put off much noise. I mean, if you dropped a cotton ball in there, the other person would have heard it. I just don't see any way that they could have managed it. Anyway, if anyone has any suggestions for what the hell this was, I'm open. I'm a 25-year-old woman living in Canada. My 12-year-old half-brother, Jake, lives in Texas with my dad. Long story short, my dad had a child with another mother. Unfortunately, he is an extremely immature parent. He tries to control Jake's contact by limiting it between me and my other siblings. I won't go into too much detail, but luckily, we both have found ways to keep in touch. So, I'm just chilling, browsing on my phone, and I get a message from Jake on Hangouts. I didn't really want to talk to him at the moment because he was just being rude earlier, but then he tells me that he was scared. Jake isn't really scared easily, so I found this kind of odd. He's kind of an intense and mischievous kid, so when he told me that, I was concerned and asked him what was up. He tells me that there's someone that's been knocking on the door for a while. Mind you, it was 10:30 PM on a Monday night, and when I asked where Dad was, Jake said that he pissed off to some bar down the street, so I asked for some more details. I asked if the person was just knocking or pounding. He said that he was pounding and that he yelled "who's there" and he was really scared. Well, I tell him to stay away from the door. He needed to get to a phone and call the police ASAP. He then tells me that they don't have a landline and he doesn't have a cell. I guess my dad had hangouts too though, because Jake was able to reach out to him, and my dad apparently called the police from the bar and said that he'd be there shortly. I told Jake that I'd stay with him on hangouts until someone arrived. He said that he was still scared because this dark figure was walking around the front door and pounding on it. He even said that someone drove by and that the guy stopped but continued afterwards. This sent shivers down my spine because this person knew what they were doing and probably had some sinister intentions, scoping the place out. I continued to talk to him and told him to let me know if help arrived. My uncle who lives down the street from them did come, and the cops eventually did too. Jake said once my uncle pulled up, the knocking ceased entirely, and my dad was still not present by the time they all arrived. Down the street my ass. I guess I should just be thankful my uncle lives in close proximity to them though. I haven't heard much since, and hopefully I'll hear about something tomorrow. I guess the worst thing was that there wasn't much I could do besides read how scared he was. And that made me all the more angry with my dad, leaving a 12-year-old alone at this hour, and the sick fuck who clearly must have known that someone was home. Well, a day goes by and I talked to Jake and asked him how last night unfolded. And pretty much all that happened was the cops said that they would patrol the block for about a week. Obviously, they didn't catch this scumbag, but at least they came a lot faster than they do where I live. I gave my brother the local police department's direct line in case he has to call on an iPad or something. But apart from that, I guess it's a waiting game now.